We have lots of great garden questions from last week's garden question and answer video. You can ask questions in the comments section below the video. That's how we pick from them each week. So I think there's like 23. We also have a surprise for somebody who's already signed up for the open garden. If you have signed up for the open garden, you're going to want to watch this video, because we're actually going to do some kind of pre-giveaways for the open garden. One of those will be given out in this video. And I think tomorrow is the last day of the discount for the weekly garden planner. So there's a $50 discount for the whole month of March. The discount code is here on the screen. If you want, again, today and tomorrow are the last 2 days of the discount on that. It's a week-by-week plan for your garden, for plan of maintenance for your garden. I think you can see Holly back here in the background. And we're going to jump into some questions quick this week. Number one, this person went wood chip crazy, but now they have a 3-year-old peach tree that's too low. What should they do? Will digging it up set it back? Would it be damaged if they left it? So the one thing about the wood chips, you know, they're going to break down. And so even if you put them 8 inches or 12 inches thick, they're gonna come down in time. So for me, I'm not gonna go out and dig that peach tree up, but I am gonna I don't want wood chips up on the actual trunk of the plant. So if that's the case, you want to go back out there and pull those back, and then know that the wood chips are going to drop in time. I don't think I'm going to dig something up. I mean, there's probably a time where that might be different, but I have a feeling that no matter how much you put down, they're going to break. You know, 8 inches of that stuff are going to become, you know, it's like snow. It's like, you know, 12 inches of snow is like an inch of rain. It's probably the same thing with those wood chips. So it's not going to be as bad as what you think it's going to be, but definitely don't allow those wood chips to be burying it. So as I've been we've planted about 8 to 10 plants or something like that over there in the new native garden, and it's very thick wood chip base. I'm pulling those wood chips back, planting those plants up a little bit, just like I always do, and then I'm feathering the wood chips back in there, but not burying anything on the stems of the plants. And so I think it'll be better than you think it's going to be, but it's going to take a minute for those wood chips to break down enough to make it look more normal. If you find that 6 months goes by and they haven't broken down enough that it seems like it's still going to be in a bowl, then that would be the time I would decide maybe to pop it up out of the ground. You don't have to, you know, I've been able to raise things in the ground, you know, without digging them necessarily completely out of the ground. You know what I mean? You can start digging from one side and raise it up, and then dig from the other side and raise it up. So it doesn't have to be quite as much of a process of having to pop it out of the ground and drop it in a wheelbarrow and take it somewhere. It could just be raised in place. How to best store plants before you're able to plant them, and how long can you wait? Well, it depends on the plants, for sure. Most plants need as much sun as they can possibly get, especially this time of year. Even plants that like the shade my trees haven't leafed out yet, so they're all in a lot of sun right now. Even shade-loving plants, you know, there is a time of year where they're in the sun, in the understory. So as much sun as you can put on them, that's the key. It's about, when you say store plants, I don't think that most of the country at this point is coming above freezing during the day, for sure. And those plants need to be outside on those days and as much light as you can give them. So I don't want them in the garage for like 2 months in the spring when they could be outside in the sun for a good portion of that and getting natural light, or inside the house. So I have lots of plants here behind the camera. There's 30 plants here, and there's some lantana that came from a greenhouse that got shipped to us. Those probably need to come in the house because it's a lot of new growth on them, and it's a tropical lantana. If it was going to be like under 40, I'd probably bring them in just in case it happened to drop a little more here. There's a pepper plant that I brought back from Florida, and a couple other things that have leafed out that I brought back from Florida. Those things I would bring in if it's under 40 at night, just for assurance. But everything else has been adapted out here to my conditions at this point. There's an oak leaf hydrangea that hasn't leafed out. It'd be totally fine out here. But I'm keeping things mobile so I can bring them in and out, but out is the key. Out. Out as much as possible. You can keep them stored forever as long as they're outside, is the answer. Let's see. Not forever, you know, obviously it grows out of a container at some point. That's an exaggeration, but I can keep them out as long as they're outside and I'm keeping them moist. You know, they can sit there all season. Wouldn't matter. Let's see, can I talk about the process of mounding up plants in damp areas? So I talked about last week, even if you're planting something that likes moist soil, when you're taking it out of a container and putting it in the ground, there's an elderberry sitting right here. This is an example of a plant that can probably take fairly moist conditions. Well, it's not used to that in that container. So when I plant it if I planted it in a moist area, I'd still raise it up. So I don't know if you've noticed before in any of the videos and planting videos I ever do, a lot of times I'll put for a larger container. For a small container, I can just eyeball it, but for like a 3-gallon or 5-gallon, 7-gallon container, I put the plant down in the hole. After I dig the hole, I take the plant out of the container, put it in the hole, and I'm trying to eyeball leaving it up above the original soil grade. But then as an insurance, I stick my shovel down across that hole and make sure that it's sticking up above that shovel. So the shovel handle's maybe an inch and a quarter wide. And I want to make sure that root ball's sticking up above that shovel. So the shovel lays across the original grade from side to side on the hole. And then I can see 100% sure that the top of the root ball is sticking up above that shovel just a bit. And that gives me the insurance, because a lot of times eyeballing something you can't necessarily see. The other thing you need to definitely do though is pack the bottom of that hole down a little bit. People talk about digging really deep holes for things. Most of the time it's unnecessary. But if you dig the hole deeper and you put the plant in and you realize it's too low, you pull the plant out of the hole, you put some soil back in there, and then you put the plant back in there and go, oh, I've got it up now. If you didn't pack that soil down underneath it a bit, it's gonna settle. So make sure, don't go crazy out there stomping it, but pack that soil down a bit so that plant doesn't settle into that hole that you dug a little too deep, okay? That's another thing that can happen. I see plant's gonna sink a little bit regardless. So leave it up, a couple inches above that original grade and assume that about half of that's gonna go away just sinking back down into the ground some. So a little higher than you think, but that's the key. But use your shovel as a guide. Put the plant in the hole, then lay the shovel kind of next to it across the hole, and make sure it's sticking up above that shovel handle, the handle of the shovel, not the shovel part but lay the handle across, and the top of that should be sticking up above that handle. But you'll occasionally see me do that in a video if I'm just kind of checking, making sure that it's above the grade, because sometimes you dig a hole so wide that you can't really see anymore whether it is up above the grade or not. I just put Holly inside. I think you could see her right at the beginning of the video. I'm not sure though. Let's see, this person has been amending their soil for 3 years. It looks great in the sunny areas, but it's not been as effective in the shady areas of large trees. Is it just a matter of being patient? Yeah. For almost certainly. It's probably drier in those shaded areas, especially during the summertime. So it's going to take a minute more. It's still, the thing with keeping these, all of this life down in the soil that I talk about all the time, about keeping it alive. It's really hard in ornamental horticulture to keep it, to regulate soil temperature. Out in the wooded areas and out in the grassy plains where it's massive and you've got all this material constantly dying back to the ground and leaving this, layer of organic material protecting that soil life. In our ornamental gardens, we come home on a Saturday and mow the grass, and cut all the, then the sunlight's hitting the roots on the trees and shrubs that have rooted out into our grassy areas. We don't mulch occasionally and leave bare spots. I talked about this in Friday's Why We're Not Mulching video. If you've watched that. So it's hard to regulate the soil moisture and soil temperature and all the things that would just happen automatically out in another space. It's just hard in a small space to do that. Keeping things planted thick, keeping them mulched, eventually you'll win that game. But I would imagine that you just don't have the soil moisture, a consistent soil moisture in your shady areas to get the process happening faster. This person wants some ideas about underplanting. So they've got a beech tree and a D.D. Blanchard magnolia. especially the D.D. Blanchard magnolia is going to get wide at the bottom. If they've planted things close to it to kind of plant thick, like we're talking about planting thick here, if they had to transplant one of those plants in the future, would they damage the D.D. Blanchard or the beech tree or whatever? Yes, when you dig, and I think there may be another question or similar question in here about this, when you dig around trees, you're going to damage roots on those trees. But if you're only damaging, it's about the circumference of the thing, the 360 degrees around that tree. If you go and chop all the roots all the way around it, you're going to do massive damage. If you do 180 degrees, you're going to do massive damage. Probably if you do 90 degrees, you're going to do massive damage. But if you go and take one little spot and damage a couple of roots, typically you're not going to really have any big negative impact. So I'm not worried about going and pulling one of those underplanted shrubs out in the future, as they get crowded. I'm not going to worry about that at all. That's not something that's going to bother that D.D. Blanchard magnolia or that beech tree in any way, in all likelihood. Okay. Somebody asked about the origin of the large green cart in one of the videos, because I was doing the, I think Friday's video from a week and a half ago was about jump starting some plants. And we always use this cart back here as a kind of a desk when we're planting things, or planting up containers and all kinds of stuff. That cart, believe it or not, Steph and I have pushed that cart since I pushed that cart since I was 16. It was at Rake and Hoe Garden Center when I was 16 years old. And so we unloaded plant trucks and all kinds of things with those big green carts. And then Steph worked there, I guess, from around 1990, something like that. Yeah, somewhere around 89 or 90, she was working there. And she was working in the annuals area where those flats fit on that, the flats of annuals and vegetables and that kind of thing fit on that cart pretty well. I think I can get about eight trays on there at the time. So she pushed that cart around like crazy too. And then when Rake and Hoe closed, I bought some of the carts and other things because my nursery business was starting. And so I have literally had that cart and me, I've been doing this, I said the other night, 39 years. That cart's been with me the entire 39 years. It does need, the tires are kind of hatted on it. It won't hold air at all anymore. I've actually got to get new tires, but I don't push anything super heavy on it, so I haven't had to replace the tires. I'm not putting 3-gallon material, plants on there like I used to at the garden center and the nursery. They were, you could put probably 12 to 15 3-gallon plants on there, something like that. And those carts have been well used over 39 years. So that's the origin of the cart. Steph and I both have pushed that cart since we were young people. Let's see. Somebody has some 40-year-old maples. Lots of them have roots out of the ground. This is the similar question to this other one. Husband wants to cut and dig up the roots on the surface. Will that damage the tree? Definitely. I mean, you can't, again, there's a limit to how many of these roots you can take out without damaging the trees. 40-year-old maples, that's a lot of roots. And, we think about, a lot of these trees do have surface roots, roots that are really close to the ground, but a lot of this surface root thing is you've been losing topsoil too. So it's been a combination of it being a shallow rooted tree with the fact that you've actually been losing soil over these years and haven't been noticing it. We think about lawns as holding soil in place, and I don't think unless you have a really thick, super well-maintained lawn, you're losing soil in it. If you have thin places, in it, every time it rains, you're losing just a little bit. And I'll notice when I go past a garden or a lawn where it's kind of gravelly on the top a little bit, I know that they've been losing soil over the years. And what remains is the heavier items. The rock doesn't wash away as easily, but the fine grain sand or clay or whatever it is eroding out of it. Yes, you would likely do some damage to the tree if you went in there and started doing that. I don't know what the answer is. I don't know how many of these 40-year-old maples you have. I might move. Everybody knows how I feel about them. And somebody asked the other day, does my neighbor care when I talk about talk poorly about his maple tree. This is a rental house back here. I don't think they care one way or the other, but that is not even a big maple. And it's rooted out entirely into our front garden over here. And then we had one over here that was matching it in every way. You know, they're just hard to garden with. And so, you know, I don't know if I guess you're trying to grow lawn space in here. You probably needs to be converted to bed space and be mulched instead, and have plants in there and kind of stop that erosion and slow down the erosion. The trees would be happier overall, and it would be less overall hassle for you to be out there having to mow it or maintain it all the time, or trip on it or walk on it, and all those kinds of things. Somebody has an Italian cypress in Houston. Zone 9 eventually turns brown and dies. Any tips? You know, I don't know if it's staying too wet. You know, Texas is an interesting place. You know, by the time you get down to Houston and around that Gulf area, it gets a lot of rain. And so, you know, some other areas of Texas getting virtually no rain. It's really bad drought. I think on the U.S. drought monitor, I think we dropped down to just, because we had a 2.5-inch rain last week, we dropped down to 1 shade on the drought monitor map here in North Carolina. I know South Florida's in a drought, but there's an area in the southwest from the bottom, basically West Texas, over to the southwest, you know, all the way over to California, that's really dry. And we expect that area to be dry, but like really red on the drought monitor. If you pull the U.S. drought monitor up and see pull that thing up and see where you are on it. You may be drier than you think you are, because there's more of the country probably than normal is in drought conditions for this time of year. This time of year normally have caught up, or at least gotten some rain and lowered that. But the drought monitor map is looks like a summer map right this minute. Back to the Italian cypress in Houston. It stays a little wet there. I mean, it's hot. You know, it's Italian cypress, a Mediterranean plant. And so we tend to see tons of them out in the desert Southwest in areas that get very hot. They do need water, you know, when it's 100 degrees outside and it hasn't rained in a while, 110 degrees or whatever. But I'm wondering if they're succumbing occasionally to the fact that I think Houston gets like 50 inches of rain a year, which is about the same as us, maybe a hair more than us. I think by the time you get over to Mobile, it's like 70 inches, but that little area along the Gulf there, you know, gets, you know, heavy rains. So I don't know. I honestly don't know. I doubt. Heat without water could kill it. You know, and you do have the kind of heat that could kill something if it wasn't raining. But you also get, you know, I don't think Houston is much above, you know, all that much above sea level, and it's, you know, gets a lot of rain. So I don't know if it's the wet that's killing them. I'm guessing at any of these things, for sure. But if you were going to try to grow one in Houston, in a place where, you know, you can go through prolonged periods of time where it's going to stay wet, you definitely want to mound that thing up, or try to grow it as a container plant maybe. So somebody they have an Angiostar fatshedra, and I just pruned mine in a video a week or so ago. It's only got one little trunk. It's healthy, but how should they prune it to get more branching? Just prune it, literally take an inch off the top of it. Wait for it to start growing though this spring. Wait to see that you've got new growth coming, and as soon as you have new growth coming on it, just prune it, and that'll force new growth from the bottom. I've pruned, ours has been winter damaged a couple times, and that winter damage, which sometimes I call a free pruning, has now branched it almost too much. I have too many branches going on, so there's a sweet spot probably where I want 3 or 4 pieces going up the porch here, but right now I've got 15, so I'm doing the opposite, getting rid of some leaders. The Carolina Midnight Loropetalum behind me, I'm sure going to get the question, is not quite in full bloom, but it's coming. It'll be another few days. It'll be in full bloom, and I'm sure it'll be in a garden plants video or a garden task video if it hasn't been already as you're watching this. Are seed holes from a bird feeder the cause of any problems? Yes, eventually. Birds are on the bird feeder right now, 10 feet from you. There's so many birds right now. It's a crazy amount of birds. But yes, I like to move the bird feeder around occasionally. Those the holes from that bird seed does eventually it'll be an area where nothing's growing, or the seed itself, the bird seed will be germinating, but that'll be it. But you see, if you leave your bird feeder in the same place for a while, you'll just create a desert underneath it eventually. That stuff just builds up too much. Again, I'm talking about not mulching this spring because I've over mulched. Well, that's an example of what happens when you over mulch, when the bird seed just keeps building up and building up, and the bird seed doesn't break down like this other organic material does as quickly. Okay, so what we're gonna do here is 3 or 4 times between now and the open garden, we're actually going to give away a plant, and it'll be a plant of your choice when you get here. Just let us know. We're writing down your name, so just let us know when you get here. You'll be able to pick a free plant. I think about over half the tickets have been sold already, and I think there's maybe 200 left, something like that. And it's Friday evening. There's some for each of the 3 time slots. So if somehow this has actually been fairly equal between Friday night, Saturday morning, and Saturday afternoon. So thank you guys for that. They're all 3 still available, amazingly enough. But we're gonna pull a name each week, and this week it's Cat Park, who actually I think lives here in Raleigh, which was kind of a weird thing. I just had Steph tell me a page number and a number down, and I went to that spot, and that's how we pulled a name. So Cat Park, when you get here for the open garden, and I didn't see when they were actually coming, just let us know you're here. We're gonna have lots of plants and other giveaway items for the open garden. So keep in mind, we'll pull about 3 or 4 more names before that time. We're gonna have lots of, there'll be hourly giveaways during the open garden for plants and other things. So first winner already. I think I'm gonna get Plants by Mail to give us a few gift cards, so that folks that are traveling here, if you happen to win something, you can take a gift card for Plants by Mail, since you won't want to fly back with a Encore Azalea or whatever. I don't know how the light will be, but here's that Fatshedra right here. And again, it's got tons of branching on it down here below, because every time it gets stung up here at the top, or I cut it on the top, it gets additional branching. This person's in Zone 7B, Long Island. They bought a conifer from Georgia. Should they wait till their frost-free date? I don't know what conifer you would have bought, but if it's got a lot of new growth on it and seems out of place, I wouldn't plant it, regardless of whether it's a conifer or a leafy evergreen or whatever. If it seems ahead of the things in your area, I would hold it. Again, leave it outside as much as possible. 7B, Long Island, you're probably not going to go below freezing many more times the rest of the season at all, maybe not at all. So just leave it outside in the container for the next 2 weeks or so. Check your 10-day forecast at that point, and then put it in the ground, because it likely is ahead of the things that are in your area. Somebody has an Aronia that they bought and purchased for a low retaining wall. It's large. Can they divide the chokeberry because it's a colonizer? Is that reasonable? I don't know, without seeing that container, whether or not you could actually go ahead and divide it at this point or not. I think you'd probably want to plant that one and let it grow for a season or 2. They do root out, and I showed in a video the other day cutting these suckers or peat branches that you lay down on the ground and cover with mulch, cutting them away from the parent plant and digging them up. But I think that getting greedy with your first plant, you may be able to cut that suckering Aronia in that 3-gallon pot up into 5 pieces, and then 3 of them die, and then will an advantage actually been gained? Probably not. So for me, I'd probably plant that 3-gallon one that you got in the ground and let it grow this season, and then about this time next year, see if you can figure out how to get in there and start cutting some of those suckers away from the parent plant, and then transplant those. They should transplant pretty easily. But I think there are times where you can get a little greedy with something, and turn one. Oh, I turned 1 into 10, and then 7 of them die. That will, now you just got 3 small plants. So I'd plant the 3-gallon and then do it next year. So, okay, this is a great question, number 14 here. The in the shade ground cover video from a week and a half ago or so, as you're watching this, I added Encore Azaleas as a ground cover. So I think of low shrubs as ground covers. So my Mojo Pittosporum back there in the shade, Wheeler's Dwarf Pittosporum back there in the shade, the Ralston's Hardy Viburnum back there in the shade, these low doming plants that will tolerate shade, they're covering ground too, just like any kind of creeping ground cover would, and they're much more tame. They're much more easy to maintain. They're much easier they don't get out of control, right? They're not seeding themselves back there. They're not doing anything that's gonna cause me a long-term problem. And undervalued low shrubs as ground cover. So, but this person said those Encore Azaleas were in the full sun. What gives with that? That's the thing about learning the nursery business, is that azaleas, believe it or not, do not grow well in the shade at all in a nursery setting. And so most old-fashioned azaleas prefer part shade, or not deep shade, but mostly part shade or moderate shade conditions in the landscape. But in a nursery setting, they get root rot issues. They get Phytophthora root rot. And so when we're irrigating something, let's say we put our azaleas under pine shade in a nursery, when we irrigate them, or when we go through some, here in the Southeast especially, we'll go through some period of time. August is the time of year this really happens, where the rain August is our wettest month of the year. And you get 3-4 thunderstorms in a row that keep those pots abnormally wet, and then you combine that with a 95 to 100 degree temperatures, and all of a sudden you start getting root rot issues, and you'll see your gardenias and azaleas and some of the things that get Phytophthora root rot in a nursery setting, that's when they collapse. Same Pittosporum does that too. There's a lot of plants that are susceptible to Phytophthora root rot, especially in a nursery situation. And you'll see them grown in the sun in the nurseries because of that. So it's kind of interesting, Sunshine Ligustrum, 100% full sun is the best color you're going to get on that plant. Maybe a little bit of shade in the landscape. In a nursery setting, that thing can't stand the sun because the roots on it get out to the edge of the pot and then start cooking because that container is above the ground, and the cooking of those roots defoliate them, and they actually get smaller in the pots. And so I ride through nurseries occasionally, and if Sunshine Ligustrum's new to them growing it, I go, well, you might want to put that in the shade. So it needs a 30% shade cloth or something like that to prevent those roots from getting too hot. But in the ground, those roots are protected and they go in the full sun. So literally, I do consultations occasionally for people who want to start nursery business, and you have to tell them, number one, you have to suspend your love of plants temporarily, because if you're in love with any of the plants, you'll make bad financial decisions. When you're in nursery business, these things are widgets, okay? This is widget 1 and widget 2 and widget 3, right? The customer loves the David Viburnum and this, but to a nurseryman, you're growing things that will sell, right? And so that's number one. You got to suspend you can love plants, but you can't love them so much that you make bad financial decisions. And then number two, you got to relearn a lot of stuff, because it's not what you think. Because a plant takes the shade in the garden, or the sun in the garden, does not define what it needs in a nursery setting, or when to fertilize it, or when to do anything to it. To relearning the same plants. So in my lifetime, I've learned them as a retail person, as a nurseryman, and as a landscaper. All the different ways in which, the plant might behave differently in different conditions. Okay, and then number 15, forever chemicals, PFABs in the garden, my opinion, how to reduce exposure when gardening. Well, that thing here is not bringing in material. So, I've talked about and I'm doing this to myself, really. I talked about a couple years ago that I wanted to get this garden down where I was not bringing things in from other places as much. But we've expanded the garden over there, and then it took a little while for this material to get big enough that we had material that we could cut off of it to make compost and make our own mulch. And part of it has been, I wanted to the garden to look a certain way. So I've brought in more material than I probably would have if I didn't have the YouTube channel. And so I've exposed ourselves definitely more, you know, bringing in bagged material and other things in here because this is an issue. I mean, we've got farms that have shut down in the country where these chemicals have ended up in farms, you know, and it ends up in cows and it ends up in meat and it ends up in, you know, milk and other things. So this is a real issue moving forward about moving materials around. There was a question about topsoil, and I don't know if it's in this Q&A. There's like 40 or 50 more questions we've written down, by the way. So there'll probably be a bonus question and answer video coming up again. But, you know, this issue is going to be, you know, it's obviously a big issue. Moving things around, bringing things in from other places into your garden. Oh, it was a topsoil related issue. And I don't want to bring in topsoil, period. I just don't want to bring anything like that in because I'm going to bring in a whole new set of weed seeds. I figured the farmer that sold that farm to the developer, you know, was it a productive farm? What was wrong with the farm? Was there something wrong with the farm soil that made them sell the farm where this topsoil came from? I don't want, you know, I want to bring in as little as possible. And so that's my thought on it. It's not necessarily related to forever chemicals. It's related to anything. It's related to bringing in some sort of heavy metal into the garden, bringing in, you know, a disease into the garden, bringing in, so as little as possible in the future. I'd like to show off having basically closed off this garden from other spaces as much as possible, other than exchanging plants, you know, here and there. Okay. Can daffodils be stored out of the ground until fall if dug up after the foliage dies back, or back into the ground ASAP? Back into the ground ASAP, but I have held them out of the ground for a while. I have dug some up post them fading back to the ground and left them in, but they were still moist. I had them out of the ground, but I just covered them up with some leaves. And that was an effective way to keep them for a while. And maybe a few months I had forgotten about them and they were fine. But keep in mind, I've said this before, any bulb that comes out of the ground, it's starting to die. As soon as it comes out of the ground, it's now drying out and getting smaller. And so that's the reason we jumpstart our dahlia tubers and other things, is because I want to get them back into moisture as soon as possible. So you're best to put them back in the ground as soon as possible. They can stay out of the ground for a while, for sure, but if you're trying to get the most out of them, I think you want to get them back in the ground and keep them moist and keep them from, I mean, they just literally start to shrink, you know, out of the ground, and especially in the summertime. So they dig them, you know, you guys are placing orders on color blends and other mail order bulb places. You're placing orders, those bulbs are still in the ground in Holland. You know, if you're ordering tulips from Color Blends in, I don't know when they'll put up their 2026 catalog or their fall 2025, you know, bulbs list will go up. I'm guessing it's probably it's early summer, I think, June, July, because that's when they know what they'll be able to get from Holland, okay? Then you're ordering them and you're booking them. They're not getting those things until right before they're shipping them. So they're not out of the ground as long as you think they are. They're still in the ground as you've paid for them in Holland. And then they're coming, you know, in the Netherlands, and then they're coming over. Okay. Somebody said tips on moving Baptisia. So this is the time of year that you could pop them out of the ground as you're seeing them start to emerge. But I will tell you, some of these new varieties of Baptisia root to the China, it feels like. They are really tough plants. Some of these new hybrid Baptisia, I've heard about folks that grow them bare root. So they grow them in the ground and then they dig them up bare root to pot into containers to sell at retail. That some of these new ones are, the machines won't dig them out of the ground very well. So if your Baptisia has been in the ground for a long time, they can be tough to dig out. But this would be the time to do it. Soil's moist. You can see where they're coming up. They're not in flower, so they're not in full flower, but it's a perennial that can really anchor itself really, really well. Most of my perennials out here in the garden, I can stick a shovel on 4 or 5 sides of it and just bend the shovel back and pop the plant out of the ground but not some of these newer hybrid Baptisias are nuclear explosion proof in the garden, apparently. So it's just going to take a minute to dig it out, but there's not really anything other than I'm telling you it's going to be a little harder than some other perennials, but other than that, they'll transplant fun. So somebody, is there going to be a ground covers for sun video like there was for the shade? Yes, absolutely. There are, I'm editing a little bit of this every day, and there's going to be like 6 or 7 videos in a row coming up for all kinds of different things, but one of them, it will be the sun ground cover video to match that shade ground cover video. And again, that trip we made to the nurseries, we were shooting 30 plus plants at each nursery. It is an incredible number of little video segments coming up on lots of different plants. So I'm looking forward to putting those up. I'm looking forward to being done editing them. It was a lot of, I think it was 4.5 hours of me running my mouth in those nursery visits. Number 19, why would it be bad to plant perennials into fresh wood chips compared to shrubs and trees? The main thing is those herbaceous, okay, so, and I've said this is kind of over the top on the internet, but when organic material breaks down, when these wood chips are breaking down, they require some nitrogen to break down, and they'll take them from the easiest source that they can find, right? So they're borrowing them potentially from plants, they're borrowing it from wherever. It does release the nitrogen once those wood chips are broken down into humus, okay? So it's a temporary locking up of some nitrogen, okay? That has less impact on woody shrubs and trees overall. It's not to say it has no impact. It probably does take some potential nitrogen away from them, for sure. But with herbaceous perennials and annuals, it stunts them quite a bit. I've got a neighbor up the road who actually watches the channel, and I noticed he did the wood chip method last year. Garden looks great, put a beautiful fence around it, really nice space, but I noticed the herbaceous perennials that were just plugged into the wood chips definitely struggled last year. I think they'll break through fine this year. That would, again, that nitrogen is going to be re-released, and I think it's more of a stunting of the plant, whereas if it wasn't in that wood material and it was more in something that had already been composted a bit more, it would have just hit the ground running. So it just basically stunts them temporarily. Can kill them probably, but more than likely stunts them. And the shrubs, you just can't tell it's happening as much. I'm sure it's having a little bit of a negative impact to have, this much wood requiring nitrogen to break down in the garden, but that's the main reason. It just seems to have on herbaceous, non-woody plants, it tends to have more of initial impact, which just kind of stunts them. And the amount of money you're paying for these things, you may not want them to be stunted when you first put them in the ground. Somebody's asking about winter damage, when to prune in general. If you're nervous about when to prune something that's been damaged in the winter, wait until new growth starts on it. That will allow you to identify where you should prune it down to, okay? If you've been gardening for a long time and it's something that's been in the ground for a long time, I think you get more comfortable in time just going out and saying off with its head, it'll be fine. Or it won't, and moving on with it. But I think initially, it may make you more comfortable. I pruned this Fats Hedra in a video a couple weeks ago. I could have waited another 2 weeks, and then I would have seen where the new growth is coming on it, and then I could have cut it off, and maybe I would have felt more comfortable, doing it. But the plant's been in the ground long enough that I'm not worried about it. So there's that. But if you're uncomfortable, just wait. You'll see where it's coming out, and then you cut it down to there. This is a new gardener. They find a lot of roots when they're planting, probably from the pines around their landscape. Is it okay to break them in order to plant shrubs and perennials? Yeah, that's gardening. You're gonna cut the neighbor. you're gonna hurt the neighbor a bit while you're putting something new in the ground. But overall, it doesn't have a big giant impact. Where you would have a big giant impact is if you were bringing a bobcat out there with a drill on the front of it, and you were drilling all the holes and you were driving on the roots and doing just massive damage. But if you're going out there on a Saturday and you're planting 3 or 5 plants in a wooded space and you hit the occasional root, sometimes you have to move something over because the root is substantial. No, that's pretty much what landscaping and gardening is cutting the roots on the neighboring plant to put a plant in the ground. Let's see. How do we manage suckers on native plants? I just go around and chop them off. Like over here, we had that salvia, that black and blue salvia, and a couple other perennials that are coming up bigger than they were last year, bigger than I want them. And so I just go over there and take the shovel and just chop them off at the base. I'll do the same thing on any sucker I see out here that I don't want. You know, it's pretty quick and easy just to go and take the shovel and chop them off right below the surface. The big thing is about waiting and not staying on top of it. If you wait 4 years for this, you know, the Aronia question back there about it being a suckering plant. If you wait 4 years and then decide that the suckers are out of control, then it's a big job and it's problematic. There's a forsythia in the neighbor's garden over there, and it's gotten so big and it's laid down and it's rooted in and it's laid down and it's rooted in and it's laid down, and it's done it over the years to the point where that plant is 10 feet wide, it's suckering, you know, at the base. So now it's be problematic to go over there and get that under control. So this is why I'm talking about this time of year, and this is the weekly garden planner type information. And again, that $50 discount is good for today and tomorrow. But a lot of, you know, there's videos in there about this, this time of year is a good time of year before everything's leafed out, that I can see all of the invasive plants that are out here in the garden that I need to clean up, weeds that I need to get out of here, you know, just in general, you know, clean up stuff, cutting out suckers from plants, maybe creating new plants, you know, from those suckers if you want to, you know, do the Aronia thing where they're going to try to divide them in the future. Controlling things that have gotten out of control. You know, this is a good time of year to be doing all of those things. It's cool outside and you can see the ground a little better than you'll be able to see it. Just 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now, this garden will be so alive and so covered up, it'll be much harder to do some of those projects. And the last question for this week, this person used hardware cloth under their asparagus, about 6 inches deep, and then they used ChatGPT and said that they will struggle. Do I agree? Yeah, I don't know. I guess you used a hardware cloth to keep a vole or something from messing with them. But yeah, there probably is a point where that asparagus, you know, will not be able to root, you know, as deep as it wants to. I don't know. You can monitor it for a while and see if it's actually struggling before you pull it up. But I really wanted Steph to write this question down because ChatGPT is a mess for our business, for ornamental horticulture. It's just an absolute mess. So for a ton of things, okay, these AI models are going to be fantastic for all kinds of jobs that they're going, you know, that they can do for us. You know, writing class papers and all kinds of things that people can use to cheat, and write books and all kinds of things with one of these things, I'm sure. And then beneficial things as well, like doing our books or whatever. But where it's going to get things wrong is it weighs the history of the internet. And so if it to answer questions. And so if I ask ChatGPT, and you all can do this, go to ChatGPT and ask it to give you the 10 best screening plants for your area, it's going to come back and tell you Leyland cypress, and the same 9 that would be in any garden center or nursery for the last 30 or 40 years. Nothing new, nothing really interesting. And again, it's going to give you Leyland cypress number 1 probably, because in the history of the internet, since we all started using it back in the early 90s, in that amount of time, Leyland cypress was probably the most talked about screening plant. And so that's why when it, you know, puts a list together, that must be the right answer. It won't, necessarily take into account that we've had issues with leylands, that leylands get way too massive for most people. And so I've tried to ask it questions in all kinds of different ways about what plants to use. And then none of the newer genetics seem to show up in any of the searches. And so what I'm saying is, it's not necessarily, I don't want to bash it completely and say it's not a good tool at all. There probably will be some uses in horticulture for us, but it doesn't, right this minute, I think it doesn't necessarily help you. If in a copy and paste world on the internet, if bad information has been copied and pasted a bunch of times, you know, then that's going to add weight to the answer for it. And so I am somewhat concerned that our reliance on it is going to create even more monoculture situations in our gardens all across the country. If that's the thing, rather than going to a garden center and talking to someone who has some expertise, who is up to date on maybe some newer genetics and newer plants, and maybe has or doesn't even have to be newer, maybe they just have a broader, they have much more broader knowledge of plants that will work in your area that may be underused or undervalued, I think would be helpful, because what we don't want is for that, hey, give me the top 10 screening plants and we all go and plant those same 10 plants, because it's going to tell you the same ones in Los Angeles as it is in Raleigh. And it's unbelievable how that, it's just not a great tool at this moment for what people are going to want to use it for give me 10 plants that will solve this problem. Because again, I don't want it to, it's always going to give the top 10, or that are the most commonly talked about ones on the internet. That doesn't necessarily give a lot of diversity to our gardens or to birds or to pollinators or anything else for us to use all the same plants. That's my concern with it. So thank you guys so much for following along. You can ask gardening questions down below. Again, we're going to be doing a few giveaways along the way to folks who have signed up for the open garden. Those tickets are available on the website. And again, weekly garden planner, 2 more days for the discount. Thank you guys so much for watching.